Imagine this. 7 teenagers head into the Siberian forests to collect pine cones. The next morning, a massive freight train with 70 carriages finds them, lined up side by side on the tracks, their bodies torn apart. The police said, a tragic accident. They fell asleep on the rails and were run over. But 2 years later, the truth comes out. All 7 boys had been dead for hours, long before the train ever arrived. So, who killed them, arranged their bodies like dolls on the tracks, and let a giant freight train finish the crime? The answer is a million times more horrifying than you think. Welcome to Midnight Hour, where mystery is real and the darkness speaks truths no one expects. Please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to like, share, and turn on the notification bell. The mystery of the 7 bodies in the remote Siberian village of 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭. On the night of August 14, 1989, a massive freight train consisting of 70 carriages was traveling along an isolated railway line deep in the Siberian wilderness. 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭 is located in southern Siberia, Russia, near the Kemerovo Oblast region, one of the coldest inhabited areas in the world. It has a harsh, subarctic climate with winter temperatures dropping to -40 degrees Celsius, surrounded by dense, isolated forests covered in snow for most of the year. It is not an official village, but rather a small railway worker settlement with only 20 to 25 residents, almost no services, and a reputation for extreme isolation and deep darkness at night. The driver and his assistant, who were brothers, were guiding the train through pitch-black darkness and bone-chilling cold when they suddenly noticed a large obstacle directly ahead on the tracks. They slammed on the emergency brakes, but it was too late. The train plowed straight over whatever was lying there before grinding to a halt. When the brothers stepped down with their flashlights to investigate, they froze in horror. 7 human bodies were neatly lined up side by side across the rails, completely crushed and mangled beneath the wheels of the giant train. The 7 victims were 15-year-old boys, lifelong friends from the nearby village of 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿. They'd come on an innocent day trip to collect pine cones in the forest and were waiting for a late-night train to take them home. Their backpacks were found arranged in a strange, almost ritualistic pattern 250 meters away from the bodies. Local police quickly closed the case as a tragic accident. The boys fell asleep on the tracks and were run over. But the families rejected this explanation outright. These were athletic, forest-savvy teenagers who didn't drink alcohol. The roar of a 70-carriage freight train can be heard from hundreds of meters away. How could all 7 sleep so deeply? And why would 7 experienced boys unanimously choose an active railway line as a place to rest? For 2 full years, the families fought in vain until, in autumn 1991, a desperate letter from the victims' parents somehow reached President Boris Yeltsin personally. Yeltsin immediately ordered the case reopened, and Moscow's 2 best investigators were dispatched, Vladimir Kuznetsov and Yuri Stolyarov. When the investigators arrived at 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭, not really a village, but a cluster of old wooden houses inhabited by only 24 people, mostly railway maintenance workers, they were met with a wall of total silence. Every single resident gave almost the exact same answer. We were sleeping. We know nothing. But one name kept being whispered: Vasily. Vasily was already in prison at the time, serving a sentence for stabbing his brother Slava to death after a drunken fight. However, rumors suggested he killed Slava to silence him because Slava had threatened to reveal an old secret. Under intense interrogation in prison, Vasily eventually cracked and began naming accomplices: his other brother, Yuri, their friend, railway worker Pyotr, Pyotr's brother, who hanged himself days after the case was reopened, and most dangerously, a visiting police officer named Nikolai, who happened to be in 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭 that exact night. Re-examination of the boys' remains, now mostly skeletons after 2 years, revealed what the original investigation had completely missed. massive blunt force trauma, shattered skulls, jaws, ribs, and chests caused by heavy tools, hammers, screwdrivers, iron bars. The boys had been brutally beaten to death long before the train ever touched them. What actually happened that cursed night? The 5 perpetrators, the 3 brothers, police officer Nikolai, the railway worker, were drinking heavily in one of the houses until they ran out of alcohol. Around midnight, desperate for more vodka and knowing no shops existed in the isolated settlement, they staggered to the tiny railway halt hoping to buy from passing vendors. Instead of vendors, they found the 7 teenagers sitting quietly with their backpacks waiting for their train. A verbal argument started. The drunk men claimed different versions later. Some said the boys were damaging railway property, others said they were just looking for a fight. The confrontation quickly turned physical. When one of the boys grabbed Nikolai to defend his friend, the police officer pulled out his service pistol and struck the boy on the head with the butt of the gun, killing him instantly. In that moment of panic, Nikolai shouted to his companions, "No witnesses." What followed was a frenzied massacre in the dark. The 5 drunken men attacked the remaining 6 boys with whatever tools they could grab: hammers, crowbars, screwdrivers, beating them to death one by one. Then, under Nikolai's orders, they dragged the bodies onto the rails, lined them up neatly, and placed the backpacks far away to make it look like the boys had abandoned their belongings and deliberately laid down on the tracks. The killers hid in the forest and waited until the next freight train completed their cover-up. Years of confessions, trials, appeals, and political interference followed. An amnesty and the abolition of the death penalty in the 1990s meant the surviving perpetrators received only 7 to 10 years each. The mastermind, former police officer Nikolai, had by then become a local politician and used his influence to delay justice for decades. Today, 𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭 is almost completely abandoned, a silent, decaying cluster of houses swallowed by snow and darkness. The 3 surviving killers, all since released, have vanished, reportedly living under new identities. The case was officially solved. Justice, however, remains buried beneath those railway tracks alongside the bones of 7 innocent boys who were murdered simply because a group of drunk men ran out of vodka on a cold Siberian night, and an entire system helped cover it up. If you were in the shoes of the 7 victims' families and the police refused to reopen the case for years, would you give up, or would you continue fighting for justice even if it took 10 or 20 years? And why? In your opinion, what is the most horrifying part of this whole story? A. That 5 adult men murdered 7 teenagers in cold blood so there would be no witnesses. B. That a police officer started the massacre and then used his power to silence an entire village. C. That the killers have gotten away almost unpunished to this day. D. Something else. Tell me in the comments. In the quiet town of Barberton, Ohio, on the night of June 6, 1998, a brutal crime shattered 2 lives and nearly destroyed a 3rd. Judy Johnson, a 58-year-old grandmother, was spending the evening with her 6-year-old granddaughter, Brooke Sutton. Around 2:30 a.m., an intruder broke into Judy's small apartment. He beat her savagely, sexually assaulted her, and stabbed her to death. Then he turned on Brooke, assaulting and beating the little girl so severely that he believed she was dead. Miraculously, Brooke regained consciousness. Covered in blood, terrified and disoriented, she fled the house and ran to the nearest neighbor she knew, a Brazilian woman named Tanya. Sobbing, Brooke begged to be taken home, saying only, "My grandma is dead." Tanya eventually drove Brooke to her parents' house, 2.5 miles away. Brooke's mother, April, was horrified by the sight of her injured daughter. The police were called immediately. When investigators asked the traumatized 6-year-old who had done this, her answers were confused at first. She said she didn't see the man clearly. Then, under repeated questioning, she said it might have been her uncle by marriage, Clarence Elkins, husband of her Aunt Melinda. Eventually, after heavy suggestion from detectives, she became certain it was Clarence. Clarence Elkins was arrested within 12 hours. There was no physical evidence linking him to the scene. No fingerprints, no DNA, no forced entry, no blood on his clothes. The only thing the police had was the word of a badly injured, terrified child. But that was enough. In 1999, Clarence was convicted of murder, aggravated murder, rape, and attempted murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with no parole until 2054. Everyone believed the case was closed. Everyone except one person, Melinda Elkins, Clarence's wife and Judy's own daughter. Melinda refused to accept the verdict. Her entire family turned against her. Her sister, her relatives, the community, everyone accused her of betraying her murdered mother. But Melinda knew her husband was innocent. She made a vow, if the system wouldn't find the real killer, she would. For 7 long years, while raising her 2 young sons alone, Melinda became a one-woman investigation team. She studied forensic science from TV shows and books. She teamed up with renowned private investigator Martin Yant and the Innocence Project. Together, they uncovered what the police had ignored or hidden: a bloody fingerprint on the door that was mysteriously destroyed during processing, hair and DNA on Judy's body that had never been tested, a heavy metal tool discarded in the yard, likely the murder weapon, the skeleton of Judy's cat, strangled with Christmas lights, evidence of a sadistic killer, not a drunk son-in-law. Most crucially, when they re-interviewed Brooke, now 9 years old, she broke down crying and admitted, "I wasn't sure. The detective told me Clarence was a bad man and that if I said it was him, they'd protect me." Then she revealed a detail no one had noticed before. "The man I saw had brown eyes. Uncle Clarence has bright blue eyes." The real killer was still out there. Through relentless digging, Melinda discovered a name: Earl Mann, a violent sex offender with a long history of attacking children. He had been released from prison just 2 days before the murder, and on the night of the crime, he was living in the house next door to Judy, the very house Brooke ran to for help. Yes, the terrified little girl had knocked on the door of her grandmother's actual killer. Earl Mann was now in prison again for an unrelated armed robbery. By an unbelievable twist of fate, he was locked up in the exact same facility, the same unit, as Clarence Elkins. Melinda came up with a desperate but brilliant plan. Using a fake name, she tried writing seductive letters to Mann to get a DNA sample from licked envelopes. It failed. Then she asked Clarence, still imprisoned and innocent, to help from the inside. Clarence watched Mann like a hawk. One day, when Mann tossed a cigarette butt on the prison yard floor, Clarence picked it up, hid it, and smuggled it out through his attorney. 48 hours after the DNA test, the results came back. A perfect match. The DNA on the cigarette butt matched the killer's DNA from Judy Johnson's body and from Brooke's assault. In December 2005, 7 years after his wrongful conviction, Clarence Elkins walked out of prison a free man. In 2008, Earl Mann was convicted of the murder, rape, and attempted murder. He was sentenced to 55 years. Clarence sued the state for the 7 years stolen from his life. He turned down a $1 million settlement and fought until he was awarded $5.25 million. It turned out the police had buried a critical piece of evidence: a police report from 1999 in which a drunken Earl Mann had bragged to an officer, "Why didn't you arrest me for killing Judy Johnson?" That single hidden report could have freed Clarence before he ever went to trial. In the end, Clarence and Melinda divorced in 2007. The strain had been too much, but they remain close friends to this day. Melinda has said she never blamed Brooke, only the adults who pressured a traumatized child into identifying the wrong man. What do you think after hearing this amazing true story? Do you think the police made an unintentional mistake? Or did they deliberately conceal evidence to close the case quickly? Could you remain loyal and fight for 7 years if everyone, including your family, turned against you and called you a traitor? Is $5.25 million enough compensation for 7 years of a man's life stolen while he was in prison? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I've read every single one. Please like, subscribe for more amazing true crime stories weekly, turn on notifications, and share this video. See you in the next episode. In the annals of Canadian crime, few cases have shocked the public as deeply as that of Colonel David Russell Williams. Once a decorated commander in the Royal Canadian Air Force, Williams was the embodiment of discipline, prestige, and trust. To his peers and subordinates, he was the model officer. To his neighbors, a quiet man who blended seamlessly into suburban life. Yet, beneath the carefully crafted facade lay a dark and fractured psyche, a man whose compulsions and hidden desires spiraled into acts of violence, sexual assault, and murder. The double life of Russell Williams remains one of the most chilling illustrations of how the human mind can harbor unimaginable contradictions. This narrative explores his life, crimes, and psychological makeup, weaving biography and analysis into a story that not only recounts the facts, but also examines the motives and hidden drives behind one of Canada's most notorious killers. Russell Williams was born on March 7, 1963 in Bromsgrove, England, before his family moved to Canada. His childhood, on the surface, was relatively unremarkable. Raised in an educated, middle-class family, he performed well in school and eventually pursued higher education at the University of Toronto. Those who knew him in his youth described him as intelligent, studious, and somewhat introverted. There were no glaring red flags in his early years. No violent outbursts, no known cruelty toward animals, no overt behavioral disturbances. In fact, his path seemed destined for success. After completing his studies, he joined the Canadian military, where he built a steady career. This early period is crucial because it highlights one of the most unsettling aspects of Williams' story: the absence of obvious warning signs. Unlike some killers whose violent tendencies surface in adolescence, Williams appeared ordinary, even exemplary. Williams quickly distinguished himself in the military. By the late 2000s, he had risen to the rank of colonel and was appointed commander of CFB Trenton, one of the largest and most important military air bases in Canada. He had flown prime ministers and foreign dignitaries, including members of the British royal family. His reputation was impeccable, and he was entrusted with national responsibilities of immense importance. To the outside world, Williams represented the Canadian military's finest qualities: discipline, service, and loyalty. He was married, owned homes, and projected stability. But behind the mask of normalcy, a secret life was brewing, one rooted in deviant sexual compulsions and a need for control. The first indications of Williams' descent into criminal behavior came not in the form of overt violence, but through covert intrusions. Beginning in the early 2000s, he developed a compulsion for breaking into homes, particularly those of young women and teenage girls. These burglaries were not motivated by financial gain, but by a growing obsession with women's underwear. He meticulously photographed himself wearing the stolen lingerie, creating vast archives of images that he stored in hidden digital folders. Psychologically, this phase reveals a progression of a fetishistic disorder. Paraphilic disorders, especially those tied to clothing and sexualized rituals, often emerge in adolescence or early adulthood. For Williams, the act of entering a stranger's home, rifling through their belongings, and appropriating intimate garments represented a powerful cocktail of arousal, control, and violation. Each burglary reinforced the behavior, escalating his tolerance and pushing him toward riskier acts. By the time he had broken into over 80 homes, his secret world had ballooned into an addiction. Like many serial offenders, Williams meticulously documented his exploits. This behavior, keeping trophies and photographing himself, suggests both the narcissism and the desire to relive the acts long after they've occurred. Escalation, from burglary to assault. As with many sexual offenders, Williams' compulsions did not remain static. The thrill of breaking into homes and photographing himself in stolen lingerie eventually waned. To sustain the same level of psychological gratification, he escalated. In 2009, Williams committed his first known sexual assaults. Under the cover of night, he entered the homes of women while they slept. Masked and armed, he tied them up, photographed them in degrading positions, and subjected them to sexual violence. His behavior reflected an increasing need for domination and control, combined with the ritualistic documentation of his crimes. From a psychological standpoint, this escalation aligns with the concept of behavioral conditioning. Each successful assault reinforced his confidence, while the secrecy and lack of detection emboldened him. Importantly, these acts revealed another dimension of his psyche: sadism. The deliberate infliction of fear and humiliation became as central to his arousal as the sexual component. Williams's violent trajectory culminated in 2 murders. In November 2009, he abducted and killed Corporal Marie-France Comeau, a 37-year-old military flight attendant. She was not only a colleague, but someone who had served under his command. Williams broke into her home, bound her, videotaped the prolonged assault, and ultimately killed her. The cruelty of the act, its planning, execution, and documentation underscored the depths of his pathology. Just 2 months later, in January 2010, he struck again. Jessica Lloyd, a 27-year-old woman from Belleville, Ontario, disappeared from her home. Williams had been surveilling her, and on the night of her abduction, he broke in, restrained her, and transported her to one of his homes. Over several days, he subjected her to repeated assaults before murdering her and dumping her body in a remote location. These murders represented the culmination of his paraphilic and sadistic drives. The careful planning, extended control over the victims, and the need to document every stage revealed a man fully consumed by his compulsions. Psychologically, the shift from voyeurism and fetishism to lethal violence is consistent with the dangerous escalation seen in homosexual offenders. The disappearance of Jessica Lloyd triggered a large-scale investigation. Police soon identified unusual tire tracks near her home, which were linked to Williams's vehicle. When investigators brought him in for questioning, his calm demeanor initially gave little away. However, as forensic evidence mounted, DNA, tire tracks, and his own digital archives, Williams eventually confessed. His arrest stunned the nation. The image of a highly decorated colonel standing in uniform and confessing to acts of sexual assault, burglary, and murder was almost incomprehensible. For Canadians, it shattered the notion that authority figures, especially military leaders, could be trusted implicitly. Russell Williams' case raises profound questions about the psychology of deviance and the duality of human identity. Number 1. Dual lives and compartmentalization. Williams lived 2 radically different lives. By day, he was a disciplined officer. By night, a predator. Psychologists describe this as compartmentalization, a defense mechanism that allows individuals to separate conflicting aspects of their identity. Williams's ability to perform at the highest professional level while committing heinous crimes suggests a high degree of cognitive dissonance managed through strict mental partitioning. Number 2. Narcissism and control. His meticulous documentation of crimes indicates narcissistic tendencies. By photographing himself in lingerie and recording his victims, Williams created artifacts of domination that he could revisit, reinforcing his sense of power. Control was at the core of his behavior. Control over women's bodies, over his secret life, and over the image he presented to the world. Number 3. Escalation and addiction model. Williams's progression mirrors that of an addiction. Initial behaviors, fetishistic burglaries, provided temporary satisfaction but eventually lost potency. To achieve the same psychological effect, he escalated to assaults and finally murder. This pattern is consistent with what criminologists term the addiction model of sexual offending. Number 4. Possible psychopathy. While only formal clinical evaluations could confirm it, Williams exhibited traits associated with psychopathy: superficial charm, lack of remorse, deceitfulness, and callousness. His calm during interrogations and his ability to deceive those closest to him suggest an absence of empathy and a manipulative nature. How did Russell Williams hide his double life for so long? Was he driven by addiction, power, or pure sadism? Share your thoughts in the comments. In October 2010, Williams pleaded guilty to all charges: 2 counts of first-degree murder, multiple counts of sexual assault, and numerous break-and-enters. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with no chance of parole for 25 years. During sentencing, the court described his crimes as heinous, deliberate, and chilling in their sadism. The Canadian military stripped him of his rank, burned his uniform, and erased his name from official records. It was an extraordinary repudiation, reflecting the depth of betrayal felt by both the armed forces and the Canadian public. The case of Russell Williams reverberated far beyond the courtroom. It forced institutions to confront uncomfortable questions about trust, authority, and oversight. How could someone entrusted with the nation's security commit such crimes without detection? Could warning signs have been missed? The revelations also sparked discussions about the psychological underpinnings of sexual violence, the role of secrecy in enabling deviance, and the need for vigilance among even society's most esteemed figures. For the victims' families, the impact was devastating and lifelong. Their stories remind us that behind every headline lies immeasurable grief and trauma. The story of Russell Williams is one of chilling contrasts: the decorated officer and the hidden predator, the image of honor masking the reality of sadism. His descent into violence illustrates how deviant compulsions, if left unchecked, can escalate into unimaginable acts. Psychologically, his case underscores the dangers of compartmentalization, the addictive cycle of sexual offending, and the traits of narcissism and psychopathy that can hide beneath socially esteemed roles. Ultimately, the tale of Russell Williams serves as both a cautionary narrative and a tragic reminder. It warns us not to assume that outward appearances reflect inner realities, and it compels us to look deeper into the complexities of the human mind, where darkness can sometimes reside behind the brightest of facades. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, share it with others, and like it. Your support really helps us continue producing more of this content.